Hey everyone, I am so excited about today's video. I know I always say that, but come on, this is what we're making today. I am super excited. I found a really talented maker on YouTube. Her name is Jess at OklaRoots, and she quilts. She also is a bag maker, and so I reached out to her and I asked her if she wanted to do a collaboration video, and she said she would. So together we came up and designed this bag, and I think it couldn't be any cuter. Let me pull it up close so you can really see the patchwork on this. Get that up there. So these are a lot of fun. My thought behind this was I like to quilt, but I don't have the time to make a full-time quilt. I think it's fun, I think it's relaxing, and I think it's very rewarding when you put all your pieces together and you see the design come to life. But I don't have the time. So my thought was, why don't I come up with a bag that has a quilt block or 2 or 4 in it, and that way I'm only making 2 or 4 or however many quilt blocks, and then we can just put that into a bag and I don't have to invest that time into a full-size quilt. As much as I would love to, I just don't have the time. So that's where Jess comes in. I asked her if she would design a quilt block for us, and she did, and she helped me come up with the dimensions for the bag, and together this is what we created. So I hope you guys aren't intimidated by this if you don't quilt. I know in my Facebook group I have seen a ton of people quilting. I had no idea we had so many quilters. But for those of you that don't quilt, don't be intimidated by this. It's really easy. I don't do this kind of stuff. I've not been a big quilt piecer. And Jess was able to just, with a few simple tips and some little bit of instruction, I was able to put this together. Now I did 4 panels on this one, and on this one I only did 2. This was actually my test block. This is the first one that I made, and it came out really well. But I was only planning on doing it just to see if I could do it before I committed to the entire project, and I did, and I liked it so much I thought I'll go ahead and make it in a bag. So I only had 2 panels, and I left the back plain. But I just love how it turned out. So again, don't let this intimidate you if you haven't quilted before. I don't either. All I've done is sewn squares together. So this was, I thought, was going to be really challenging, and she made it super easy. So how this is going to work, I'm going to send you over to Jess's website or YouTube. I'll have them both linked in the description below the video. And when you go over there, she is going to give you all the instructions, the PDF, an SVG, how to cut out and how to assemble this panel, the quilted panel. And then you're going to come back here, or do my part first, and then we're going to assemble the rest of the bag. I'm going to walk you through the construction of the bag, putting it all together, and Jess is going to give you the instructions for this middle panel. Now, if you just don't want to do the quilting, this is the first bag that I made when we just came up with the dimensions, just to see what I liked, or if we liked the size or whatnot. So I just took a piece of fabric that I liked and put it in the middle instead of using the quilt block. So you can, this is another option. You can use this video and create one without doing any of the patchwork whatsoever. Just find a piece of fabric that you really like and want to display, and you can do it that way. So without further ado, let's get started, and I'm going to show you how to put this together. So here's what you need. You're going to need fabric for the top and the bottom portion of the bag. Now this can be cork, as I'm going to use. It can be vinyl. It can be fabric. Do whatever you want. However, if you're using fabric, then you want to line your pieces for the top and the bottom of the fabric with fusible fleece so that they match your panel that's going to go in the middle. But the measurements for this, and you don't have to worry about writing down all of the measurements. I will link them in the description below the video, and you'll have to hop over to Jess at OklaRoots to get the measurements for the middle portion. But for your top portion, this is going to be 2.5 by 18.5. You're going to need 2 of those. For your bottom portion, you're going to need 18.5 by 5.5. So 18.5 by 5.5, 2 of those. Next, you're going to need your handles. Now I am using the cork for the handles. Mine are 25 inches long, and I made them 3 inches wide, and then I folded them in half and stitched down both edges because I don't have to worry about enclosing those raw edges on the cork. If you're using fabric and you want to make them with this method, you're going to need to make that 25 inches long by 4 inches wide, and then you're going to press the long ends into the middle, fold it in half, stitch along both of your long edges, and secure it that way. I would add a little bit of shape flex on the inside of your handles or some interfacing just to give them a little bit more structure if you're using fabric. Totally optional. So 25 inches long by 4 inches if you're doing fabric, 25 inches long by 3.5, or however wide you want it. You just need to put that in half. If you're using the cork, this is all I did. I just took a piece of cork, and again, mine is, it's 2 inches wide. So I made my straps 1 inch. So you just want to take your cork, and I just folded it in half, and then I clipped it just like so. And then I just stitched along both of the long edges, so I didn't have to have those extra 2 inches to fold into the middle. So that's optional, however you want to do that. I'm using cork, so mine measured 2 inches by 25 inches. You're going to need 2 of your quilted panels. This is where you're going to hop over to Jess at OklaRoots site, and I'll have all that linked in the description below the video. She's going to teach you how to make these. Don't be intimidated by this. This is really simple. I am not a quilter at all, and I was able to whip these up really easy. If you have a Cricut maker, she's also got an SVG for you, so you can even cut out the pieces. So she will give you the measurements for this, and if you want to substitute this for just a piece of fabric, a cute piece of fabric without the quilting, you can do that too. But again, you're gonna have to hop over there to find out what this finished measurement is supposed to be. Now, if you want to add a pocket on the inside of your bag, this is optional. I'm going to add a pocket. I cut this to, let me double check, because I just used a scrap that I had. This is cut to 9 inches by 12 inches, and then it's gonna be folded in half. So however big you want your pocket, just double it so that when it's folded in half, it's about the size that you want the finished pocket. Mine's, again, 9 by 12, and I just used some of my leftover fat quarter from the quilted panel. You're also, optionally, you want a tab for the lobster clasp. I like to put one of these inside, just so if you put your keys in there, you're not having to dig at the end of the bag to find your keys or whatever. I also, in the other bag, I hooked a little coin purse inside, so you could also do that. But I like to just use a lobster clasp, and to do that, I just use, again, a scrap piece of cork, just folded it in half, stitched along the long edge, and that is my little tab piece. If you want to do fabric, you're going to do the exact same method. You're going to cut a little 2 by 3 piece of fabric, you're going to fold it in half, press it, open it up, fold those long edges to the middle, fold it in half, stitch along the long edges, and that will be your fabric tab. So whatever you want to do, that's an option, and you don't even have to put this in there. You also need the swivel lobster clasp. And I do recommend putting this in there rather than just a D-ring, because often if you have your keys or something, you don't have a hook on there to hook them on the D-ring. So this way you can hook whatever you want in there. And then lastly, you're going to need your lining fabric. Now your lining fabric is going to be 15.5 tall by 18.5 wide. I used all fat quarters on my project, so I had to piece my lining pieces together. You can just use a solid piece of fabric. That's absolutely fine, but I have a ton of fat quarters and I am trying to work my way through them, so I used a couple fat quarters, and just piece them together to get my 18.5 by 15.5 inch tall bag. So the first thing we're going to do is construct our pocket. So again, this is optional. If you don't want to do this, you can go ahead and fast forward. But to construct my pocket, I'm just going to fold this in half, just like so. And then I'm going to take it over to the sewing machine, and I'm going to stitch all the way around, leaving a opening about 2 to 3 inches wide just to turn this right side out. It doesn't even need to be that big. And then I'm going to stitch all the way up the bottom. So you want to leave that opening on your long edge where your ends are open. So down, around, leave an opening, pick it back up, and back up. All right, so I've stitched my pocket in half just like so. We're just going to trim off those corners. Make sure you don't clip your seam. And then you're just going to reach inside and turn this right side out. And then use a pin, a chopstick, a bone folder, whatever you have. Reach inside that opening and make sure your corners are nice and straight. Okay, once you have everything in place, you want to give it a nice press. My opening is right here. I've got the raw edges turned towards the inside so that my seam lines up, just like this. We're going to give it a nice press, and then we're going to take it over the sewing machine, and we're just going to stitch on this folded edge, not the end with the opening, but the top folded edge. This is going to be the top of your pocket. Just run a nice top stitch right along that top edge from end to end. So there is my top stitch along that folded edge. I still have this opening in the bottom, and I've given it a nice press. Now you're going to take one of your lining pieces, and again, I pieced mine together, but yours might just be plain lining. And by the way, I should have mentioned, I did put SF 101 or Shape Flex on the back of my lining pieces just to give it a little more body. You don't have to do that if you don't want to, but I almost always use Shape Flex on my linings. Okay, so now we have our lining piece. We're going to fold it in half so the short ends are touching, and we're going to establish where that center point is. You can mark it with a marker if you want, whatever you want. I'm just going to put it right here on this 20-inch line. And I know that's where the center is. Perfect. I'm going to open it up. I just gave it a light finger crease just in case I lose my space, but right now I know that it's straight with my mat and the 20-inch line is straight. I'm going to fold my pocket in half the same way. And you can put your pocket wherever you want. I'm going to put mine right here, so it's just grazing my patchwork here. And that measures just about 2.5 inches from the top of the bag. So if you want to measure down 2.5 inches and place the top of your pocket. Once you have your pocket in place, go ahead and pin it so that it doesn't move. And then you're going to take it over to the sewing machine. You're going to back stitch. So down, across the bottom, which will close up that opening that we have, and back up the top, back stitch. So you're going to sew all 3 sides, leaving this center top open. So down, across, and up. All right, so we've got our pocket sewn into place. I'm going to remove my pins. Now, this step is optional. If you want, you can add a line of stitching right down the center and make 2 separate pockets. You could add a couple of pin pockets over here on the side, which I think is actually what I'm going to do. I want a big pocket so that my phone fits in here, but I'm just going to measure over about 1 inch and make a line, and then maybe another inch and make a line. And I'm just using a Pilot Friction fabric marker. And then I'm just going to take this over to the sewing machine and I'm going to stitch right on those lines, and that will make 2 pin pockets. Okay, so I've got 2 pin pockets and then I've got a larger pocket. You can divide that up any way you want. One tip I will give you is when you're sewing these lines for your pocket, sew from the bottom of the pocket up. What happens if you sew this way, the fabric can start to bunch up and then you'll end up with a pucker at the bottom because it doesn't have anywhere to go. This end is open so that if you start here and it pushes it up, it has room to expand. So now it's time to add the D-ring. And again, this is optional, but I'm going to use a piece of cork. And again, I have just folded a piece of cork in half and stitched the long edges on both sides. If you want to use this method, I would start with about 2 inches and then fold it in half, fold the long ends in, fold it together, and you're going to end up with about a 1/4 inch wide tab. But I'm going to use my cork, so we're just going to loop our lobster clasps through that. And I like to leave enough room here that we don't have to worry about stitching over that, but that's up to you. I'm going to put mine down about 2.5 inches so that it's equal with the top of my pocket. And I'm just going to clip that into place. Perfect. Also, if you want to add any labels on the inside, go ahead and add them at this time. I might put a logo label inside. That's totally optional. You don't have to do that, but this is a good place to do it if you want to do it. So go ahead and secure your tab down, add any label work that you want to add, and I'll meet you back here. Okay, so now we're going to focus on the outer panel and attaching our handles. And I do want to mention, you can also just use cotton webbing for your handles, and that would make it really easy, really simple. This is available at Joann's. I'll have some linked in the description below the video. But you don't have to do either the cork or the fabric. You could just use cotton webbing and just cut it off 2 pieces, 25 inches long, and you're good to go. All right, the next thing we're going to do is apply our handles. So we're going to take our panel, lay it down, and I'm going to measure in 5 inches, and I'm just using the grid on my mat. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'm going to pin it down. Make sure it's not twisted. And I'm going to do the same thing over here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and put it in the 5-inch mark, just like this. And I'm assuming this is the top of my bag that's going to face up. All right, once you have that into place, you're going to take one of your 2.5 by 18.5 inches piece of fabric or cork or vinyl, whatever you're using, and you're going to put that face down right on top. And we're going to clip that into place. And you're going to sandwich that handle right in the middle, so lift up your clip, sandwich that right in the middle. And this is going to give us some extra stability in that handle. Make sure your handle's straight. You want to make sure it's not going like this. You want to make sure it's straight with the top. And you're going to clip that into place. Then you can lift this handle out of your way, and you're going to take one of your 5.5 by 18.5 inches of fabric or cork or whatever you're using, put it pretty side down, and we're going to line that up with the bottom of the bag. And clip that into place. Okay, once you have that done, repeat that process for your second panel. And then you're going to take this over to the sewing machine, and you're going to stitch along this edge, you're going to stitch along this edge, and that edge. So you're going to stitch along the long side of both of your panels, securing the handles into place, securing the top and the bottom panels into place. When you go over the handles, I recommend that you backstitch a couple of times just to give it a little bit of extra reinforcement. I use closer to a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Jess uses closer to a 1/2 inch seam allowance. It's going to work either way, but make sure whatever you do that you use the same seam allowance throughout the project. So if you're going to use a 1/4 inch, use a 1/4 inch. If you want to use a 1/2 inch, use a 1/2 inch. Either way, just be consistent throughout the entire project. But either way, it's going to work out. Just be consistent. So I'm going to take this over to the sewing machine and again stitch all 4 of my long edges, back stitching over my handles. Okay, so both of your panels should look like this. So flip it over and then fold your seam allowance towards your quilted piece. Just like this. So it should be laying totally flat. You can press it if you're just using fabric. If you're using cork or vinyl, I would just finger press it. And then you want to take it over to the sewing machine, and you're going to top stitch right along this edge and right along this edge on the quilted panel. And I've already done this one. I don't know if you can see it, but I have a stitch going right along here, and that's holding that in place. It's holding that seam down so that it's nice and flat. I didn't want to put it on the cork side just because I don't like to perforate the cork any more than I need to. So that's why I'm pushing the seam up. If you prefer to put it the other way, go ahead. I think your handles are going to lay a little bit nicer if you push those seams towards the quilted panel. And then go ahead and top stitch both of your pieces right along this one and right along this one. All right, so you've got two panels that look like this. Isn't this starting to look really, really cool? I love it. All right. Unfortunately, I had some camera difficulty and I lost a little bit of footage, but I think we're okay. I'm just going to patch this in here. So you've just completed your front panel. You did your top stitching on the top and the bottom. The next thing you're going to do is stitch a square around your handles. So what you're going to do, your handles should be facing up now. And you're just going to stitch along that line that you used to close the handle when you created it. You're going to stitch along that line, across the bottom, back up, and across, leaving about 3/4 of an inch to an inch open at the top. We're going to use that to close the bag. And you're going to do that to all 4 handles on both outer panels. So go ahead and stitch that square around the handles. And again, you want to leave about 3/4 of an inch to an inch up here that is not sewn. So my squares are from here to here. So we still have room up here to close our bag up. So go ahead and do that and meet me back here. Okay, now you want to take both of your outer panels and put them pretty sides together, right sides together, and line it up like this. Put your handles up out of your way. And then you want to line everything up, go over to your side panels, and where the cork or your bottom fabric meets your quilted panel, you want to line that up and clip that into place on the top and the bottom. So I'm lining those up and then clip that into place. Same here. Line that up and then just use your wonder clips and clip that into place. Once you have those critical junctures pinned into place, then you can go ahead and add some extra clips if you want, just to secure everything into place to keep it from moving. Use as many or as little as you feel comfortable with. And then you're going to take this over to the sewing machine. You're going to back stitch. So down, pivot, across, pivot, and back up and back stitch. So you're going to sew all 3 sides, leaving the top open. While you're at it, grab your lining fabrics, and we're going to do the same thing. So we're going to put those pretty sides together. If you have seams in them, if you patch yours together like I did, go ahead and match those up and clip them. Match your seams up first, and then go ahead and clip the rest of it. You're going to leave an opening about 4 inches in the bottom of the bag, and then you're going to back stitch, sew down, pivot, sew up to your first line. Don't sew between the lines. Pick it back up, back stitch, pivot, and back up and back stitch. So you're going to sew all 3 sides, leaving an open right here, and always back stitch at the beginning and the end of your stitches. So go ahead and do that and meet me back here. All right, so we've got our bag all stitched together, and now we're going to box our corners. I'm going to use an 1.5 inch boxed corner template. I have these available in my shop. If you don't have box corner templates and you're interested, I'll put a link in the description below the video. But you don't need these. You can absolutely just use a ruler. So what you're going to do is measure using your seam as your guide. You're going to measure 1.5 inches up from this bottom seam. So 1.5 inches up and 1.5 inches over from the side seam. And then you're going to make a square. So I'm just lining my square up on my stitches, and then I'm just using a marker and I'm going to make a square just like that. If you want to do it with a ruler, you can do it that way. So you're going to put your 1.5 inch mark. So that's right here. I'm going to measure 1.5 inch over and 1.5 inches down from your seam. We're not measuring from the edge of the bag, we're measuring from our seam. So whether yours was a 1/4 inch or a 1/2 inch, whatever it was, you can do it. That's why I like these box templates, because I can just line this up on my seam and then draw my square. You're going to do that on both your lining and your outer fabric. So again, I'm just going to line that up with my seam. Draw a line. Draw a line. Same here. I'm using Pilot Friction fabric markers. These just erase with the heat of an iron. Once you have those corners drawn, you're just going to use some scissors, and I recommend using scissors, not a rotary cutter, for accuracy. And you're just going to trim out those corners. Try to be precise. Don't overshoot it. All right, once you have that done, it's totally optional to if you want to do this, but I like to take it back over to the sewing machine and stitch right along those edges just to make sure that they're not going to come undone. You don't have to do that, but I find it helps with really nice box corners because the seam doesn't split open. So if you want to run a couple of stitches right where you cut, I would go ahead and do that. Again, it's totally optional, but I'm going to. Okay, so once you have your corners cut out, what you're going to do is open the corner, and you're going to, this is the corner we cut. We're going to pull those apart, and we're going to meet that side seam with the bottom seam. It should make a straight line. You can push one seam to the left and one to the right if you prefer, or if you want to open your seams, you can do that. I push one to the left, one to the right. I don't like to stress my seams out any more than I need to. So once you have those lined up, go ahead and throw a few clips in there. If you're using fabric, you can use pens. If you're using the vinyl or the cork, I would recommend using clips. And I'm just going to clip that. Then I'm going to go over to the other side, do the same thing. I'm going to take the corners that I cut, pull those out, match to the front and the back. I'm going to see this seam I pushed this way, that way. So I'm going to push it this way up here so that that's nice and flat. And then I'm going to push this one the other way. Clip it. Set that aside, and we're going to do the same thing to the lining. Open up the cut edges. Line up those seams, the side seam with the bottom seam. One to the left, one to the right. Clip, and one last time. Open it up. Check this end. I went that way on this side, so I'm going to go this way over here. All right, now you're going to take this over to the sewing machine, and you're going to stitch right across those straight edges on all four corners using the same seam allowance on all four corners. So again, if you're using a 1/4 inch. All right, so we've got our corners boxed. They're sewn shut. You're going to take your outer bag and turn it right side out. Make sure you push those corners out. So now we're going to take our lining and we're just going to place it over the outer bag. So this bag's going right inside, just like this. Just push it down. So when you look at it, you should have pretty side to pretty side. The inside of your bag looking at your fusible fleece, and pretty side to pretty side. Okay, so now you want to take your handles and you're going to push those down out of your way. And remember, we left this opening right here. That's our allowance for stitching. So you're going to line up this side seam with your lining side seam, push one way and one the other, clip it into place. I'm going to push this handle down. Everything lined up. I'm going to line this side seam up. One to the left and one to the right, and clip that. And then we're just going to kind of get everything situated. All right, and then pull everything nice and tight and go ahead and finish clipping the top. Make sure that your handles are down. Where my handles are, I'm going to put 2 clips just to remind me to make sure when I stitch over that I don't stitch in that seam allowance. Turn it over. You don't want to stitch over that handle. Okay, now you're going to take it over to the sewing machine and you're going to top stitch right along that outer edge all the way around the bag. I like to start at a side seam, it just doesn't show as much. Again, make sure that your handles are down and that you're not stitching over those handles. So go ahead and stitch that all the way around. All right, once you have that stitched into place all the way around the top, you're just going to reach in this opening that you left in the bottom and start pulling this bag right side out. Reach inside that hole and again make sure your corners are pushed out nicely on both the lining and the outer. Looks great. All right, now you can take it over to your pressing surface and you just want to press the raw edges in on your opening in the lining that we just turned it through. So just make sure those are nice and pressed in. And then you can either hand stitch this or machine stitch it. I'm just going to machine stitch it. It doesn't bother me. It's on the inside of the bag at the bottom. But that is totally up to you. So I'm going to press it and then I'm just going to stitch that seam closed. All right, we're almost done. Now we're going to put this on the tuck our lining back in. Okay, so now you want to make sure that you get this lining pushed inside your top fabric. So you shouldn't see the lining from the top fabric. So just push that down in there. You can press it from the fabric side if you're using cork or vinyl. If you're using all fabric, you can press it from the outside. But you want to get that nice and smooth in there. And then once you have this all pressed down, I'm going to take mine over to my ironing surface and work on that a little bit. But once you have it all pressed down so that you don't see the fabric like this, you want it all nice and smooth. The seam should be right on the top. You're going to take it over to the sewing machine and you're going to top stitch on the cork right across the entire top and include your handles right down in your top stitching. So you're going to go right over the handles all the way around the bag. All right, you just completed your bag. You can see I went ahead and added that top stitching right around the top. It's probably easier to see it on the lining. But that holds everything into place. I went over my handles, so there's some additional support. Everything is secure into place. You open it up, we've got our pocket, we've got our little clasp, and that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed making these totes. We had so much fun designing them. Don't forget to head over to OklaRoots so that you can get the center panel and the SVG and subscribe to her channel. She's got some great stuff over there. She loves making bags, she loves making quilts, and a lot of other fun projects. So you guys make sure and check her out. I really think you're going to like her. And you know, I really think this is just the perfect size tote. Now we both made a holiday version and we both made a everyday version. And either one I think is super cute. These are a great size. You can get a lot of stuff in here. And you know, you've got this, I can show you on this one. You've got this extra clip in here. And so on this one, I thought this was kind of fun. I made a matching little coin purse to go inside so that if I have some things that I want to put in there, some change, money, whatever I want to put in there, lipstick, I've got a little clutch that I don't have to dig in the bottom of the bag. So there's another optional idea is to make a matching coin purse, and I hooked that right on that lobster clasp that we've got in there. So like I said earlier, you don't need to worry about the dimensions. I have a PDF download available for you. I've got it linked in the description below the video. You can get that right off my website, and Jess will have the SVG if you'd like to cut this out with your Cricut, as well as PDF templates if you don't have a Cricut. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I had a lot of fun working with Jess over at OklaRoots to design this pattern. And in fact, we've both liked it so much, we made multiples of the bag. It's really versatile. It's a great size. It's a perfect size for an overnight, a travel bag, a go-to-school bag, any kind of bag that you need just to tote your stuff around. As always, if you decide to make a Parkside Tote, please tag Jess and I, Jess is OklaRoots on Instagram and Facebook. And you know where to find me, Lorrie NuneMAKER, Instagram and Facebook. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to stop over to oklaroots.com to get the pattern, instructions, and video tutorial on how to make the quilt portion of the bag. See you guys. Bye.